So if you come with a mentality that you know you're not going to succeed, you're going to go forward and then you're going to hit an obstacle. So you're going to move a bit to the right and then you're going to hit another obstacle and then you move a bit to the left. And you just go on. You keep on jogging forward no matter what happened. Is kind of like the state of mind of the founder. But don't expect things to go well. Things won't go well. Things will turn against you and won't go the way you thought it would. So plan in advance and, know that this is the game. This is like an 8-year marathon that you're running here. This is not a sprint where you finish everything in a year and a half and you're good.
Hey everybody, Tanner here with WAGMI Ventures. On today's episode, we have Yuri Klarman, co-founder and CEO at BloXroute Labs. For anyone who's new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast where we do snapshots with interesting builders and founders from across Web3. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. But for now, let's get into it with Yuri at BloXroute Labs. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm here today with Yuri Klarman, co-founder and CEO at BloXroute Labs. Hey, Yuri, what's up? How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks, Tanner. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I know we got a ton to talk about, and it's going to be a great conversation. So, before we jump into all the awesome work happening at BloXroute, I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about your story because, before BloXroute, you were at Northwestern doing a PhD in computer science with a focus actually on cryptocurrency networks. And so I think, maybe my first question would maybe be really two questions. First, can you talk a little bit about your introduction to crypto kind of in general, and then really, talk a little bit about your story from academia to Web3?
Sure, which is one and the same. It's the same story. I think a lot of people in crypto has how did I stumble into the crypto rabbit hole? So I actually used to be a software engineer back in Israel after having, I had my bachelor degree in computer science. And I decided, after spending some time doing it, it wasn't as interested as one could imagine. I said, I'm going to move to academia. Academia is great. It's fun. You come up with cool ideas. You play with them for a bit. And then, next year you do something else. Tons of fun. And so I started my PhD at Northwestern University with my then advisor, now co-founder, Kuzmanovic, which is really, it's not crypto, just, networking. So computer networks, and at heart, before anything else, I am a networking guy. But kind of through our research, we stumbled upon into crypto and Web3 and blockchains. We had one academic project, which was kind of if you're not familiar, in academia, you write a paper, you send it somewhere, it gets rejected. You send it somewhere else, you get rejected. You have a few around them, you adjust them accordingly. You have the paper written, you change the story about it for a bit, and then until it lands somewhere and you move to a different project or you do something else in the meanwhile. And so we had a project that eventually landed. Now it's called WebCoin. Basically, we had a system, it was scraping web pages. We needed a better story around it. And said, can we make a blockchain that instead of proof of work, and this is 2016 or so, instead of proof of work of hashing numbers, can it crawl the internet and create an index from it? So basically, it's a competitor to Google and Bing and others. So this is pure academic, but it's a cool idea. And we made it happen, and it landed, and it's a great paper. But then afterwards, we're kind of wait, let's look at other stuff in crypto, or back then in blockchains. And being networking people, we were very different, coming with a very different perspective from most people in crypto, definitely then. Because most people in crypto come from cypherpunk. Okay, so you know how if you have a hammer, every problem is a nail? Then if you're coming from cypherpunk, let's create a zero trust cryptographic solution for anything you could imagine. Something doesn't work. So back then, scalability problem, the block size, I don't know if you're familiar with that, Bitcoin Cash, block size debate, everything around that. And let's find ways to scale blockchains by using more cryptography. And we were no, the problem is at the network layer. So I actually have a PhD showing that the real problem for blockchains to scale is how long it takes for blocks to propagate on the wire and everybody reach a consensus. And if you were to try to make blocks 10 times bigger, it will take 10 times longer to propagate, so you won't get any scale at all. So that was my starting point into crypto. And BloXroute, which is kind of the crown jewel of my PhD dissertation, is basically started as solving that. Can we propagate information, transactions and blocks very, very fast? nowadays basically at the speed of light. We propagate information. I think our global propagation is under 140 milliseconds. So almost at the speed of light. And when we started, 2016, 2017, the idea, our thinking was, can we scale blockchains? And we played with it for a few things, etc. But we really found product market fit and change everything that we do and our focus in the summer of 2020, when DeFi happened. When in the DeFi summer, all of a sudden, everybody wanted to see everybody else's transaction faster. And they wanted to send their transaction faster. And they want to see blocks, what the stake. And so all of a sudden, we became this kind of like flash boys for DeFi. We have the infrastructure to propagate information fast. It allows you to see everybody else's transaction. It allows you to send your transaction without being seen by others, so nobody front run you, or you could try to back run or front run others and get the latest blocks so you can capture arbitrage. All these things. So all of a sudden, we moved from like, oh, here's a cool idea of infrastructure which propagate information fast, which again, we don't do any scalability nowadays. Like it's not what we do at all. It started in that direction. All of a sudden, we are the infrastructure for initially DeFi traders, and later when MEV became a thing, all MEV surgers became our users. Everybody used it. And so, I started in academia, but when we came up with the BloXroute idea, I remember there was this one day. So we were 3 co-founders, myself, Alex, my then advisor, my co-founder, and Eyal, my COO. But I remember before we started the company even, I was sitting with Alex in the room next to the whiteboard, and we're kind of, listen, this is $1 billion idea. It's not $1 million. It's $1 billion idea. We kind of have to do it. I had zero intention of being a founder or being a CEO or doing any of it. Like, I'm going to academia, right? I'm not an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are douchebags. They're not nice people. I'm a geek. I'm one of the developers. I'm one of the good guys. But it was such a good idea. We said and again, it eventually pivoted to be basically the same tech stack, but the use case turned out to be in DeFi, in MEV, which I'm super bullish on. But I had no intention of actually doing it. It just that all of a sudden, in the middle of your life, you run into something. It's I have to do it. It's I can't not do it. So that's kind of my story, how I moved from being, proper academia. And, I did finish my PhD, but I didn't go to academia the way I thought I would, into becoming a full-time crypto founder who's online all the time and has no work-life balance. And, because in crypto, your work is also your hobby. And it's also it's also a bit of a game and an addiction. So basically, you're all the time online, which isn't very healthy, but it's kind of you find yourself sometime in that position.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fascinating. I mean, that makes total sense, the continuity of how that all came to be. So, one question that's kind of a recurring one here is it's really about kind of early challenges and early opportunities, where you kind of painted this picture of how this came to be. I'm curious, maybe on 2 dimensions, what some early challenges might have been. And I think those 2 dimensions might be one, kind of as you mentioned, you did not see yourself as an entrepreneur, right? So what for you was that transition like to becoming a founder and learning to kind of build what you've built? And then, 2, just kind of actually the thing itself. I'm really curious, what were maybe 1 or 2? Yeah.
So maybe it's worth really stopping on this, because somebody who hears a story might think, oh, Uri's path has been like a path of roses, and you come up with a cool idea, then everything works. And no, this is hard. It's super fun, but it's also very hard. So on the transition for me, I like to say that everything that I know as a CEO, I learned while I was a bartender and a waiter back in my early 20s. And so I actually felt very comfortable moving to the CEO and giving talk. It's, it's a lot about I like to say it's kind of like dating. Okay, especially when you're race finding it. You want to be very nice to people and very friendly, but you kind of play this game. They want you more than you want them. You're kind of slightly too cool for them. So it's very much like that. There is a game being played. And again, especially with VCs, but also like when collaborating with others. So I actually feel very natural. Like the transition to doing that was very easy for me. Because also when you're a bartender, okay, you work you're very friendly. You're chatting with everybody coming. You also have this posture of like, oh, I'm very cool. I'm a bartender. And so that was the easy piece for me. But, and having co-founders is extremely important. Okay, like being a single founder is 5 times as hard and probably isn't worth it, and you'll fail more likely. So basically, I do something, Eyal do other things. Alex was doing third things. And so we made sure that the burden kind of like split between everybody, and that is a game changer. Doing it by yourself and not having somebody to rely on and have your back is a different game altogether. But even in that settings, somebody was just writing something on Twitter about how founders should take care of themselves and mental health and whatnot, etc., because of some sad stories you hear there. I strongly remember how in March 2020, we were in the middle of raising a round, COVID hit, everything came crashing, and we were like, the round crashed, like we didn't raise the amount that we wanted, and we were like, wait, we have like a 9 months of runway, and if we don't change something very fast, we're going to have to fire 75 people in the company, which is a huge burden. Like it makes it hard to breathe. Okay, so people had left other places. They were working in other places, and I spoke with them and I told them, we're building this. This is super cool. This is going to be a success. Leave everything that you're doing and join me in this journey. And I'm going to have to tell them, like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, it didn't work out. We're going to have to let you go. So luckily, things have turned around very, the bull market and the DeFi summer and afterwards. And now we're very successful. It actually made me realize how important it is to have a giant war chest. So we have more than a decade of a runway right now for BloXroute, because like we're making millions of dollars in revenue, and we have a giant war chest, and we can go for as long as we want or need. But back then, this was super hard. This is a giant challenge. Things don't go how you want them to or how you expect them to, and you're going to run into all these issues. So maybe if I have 2 pieces of advice on that regard, is one, somebody told me very early, don't count the peanuts, don't count the cents on the floor. Think about the big money. So when you're taking investment, take larger investment. Make sure you have money. Even if you think that in a year you could raise more at a higher valuation. So why should you give part of your equity? And why have a co-founder? And now you have to share half of the upside. Like this is the wrong way of thinking about it. Think what would make sure you succeed no matter what. Raise more money than you need. Bring a co-founder and share like the burden with them, or start it with a co-founder would be my advice. So that's advice number 1. And advice number 2, I'm not sure it's advice, but maybe a point of view. Coming from academia, I think I was very prepared for this. So as I mentioned earlier, in academia, you spend a year building something, especially in computer science and specifically in computer networks. You send it to a conference, you work for an entire year, and then they come back to you and tell you, no, this is terrible. We're not accepting it. And then the first time it happens, you're crushed. It's terrible. And then you started already working on something else and you send it to somewhere else. And then the second time you get a rejection, it's hard, but not as hard. Third time, it stings a bit, but not that bad. After that, you're like, yeah, you send it, you get rejected. Sure, I was expecting it. I was already planning to send it somewhere. And then when your papers actually land and get accepted in places, it's like, wait, what? So if you come with a mentality that you're not going to succeed, you're going to go forward and then you're going to hit an obstacle. So you're going to move a bit to the right, and then you're going to hit another obstacle, and then you move a bit to the left. And you just go on. You keep on jogging forward no matter what happened. Is kind of like the state of mind of the founder. But don't expect things to go well. Things won't go well. Things will turn against you and won't go the way you thought it would. So plan in advance and know that this is the game. This is like an 8-year marathon that you're running here. This is not a sprint where you finish everything in a year and a half and you're good.
Yeah, it's terrific advice. I think that's all really fascinating. So kind of tagging on to something you said, so you built this war chest, you've got what you need to kind of move forward. As you think about what is this vision you're moving forward to that gets you excited, that keeps you coming back every day, how do you think about the impact that BloXroute is making in a more general way and what you guys want to do over the next, 2, 3, 5 years? What are you guys building towards?
So So that's a fantastic question. So we're a major actor in DeFi. Okay, like in the latest bull market, at the peak of the bull market, we were routing so maybe just like for people to understand, people use our infrastructure, basically servers all around the world, to receive information faster, to hear transaction before they're included, to hear blocks, and to send their transactions and nowadays MEV bundles to the validators. And so people use us for DeFi. And in the latest bull market, we were routing $1.5 billion of trades per day for our users. So something like 40% of all DeFi came from our users anywhere, from Wintermute and Jump and other large like traders to an MEV searcher in a basement in Taiwan that nobody knows who is, and anywhere in between. Wallets and protocols and teams and traders and day traders and large traders and small traders. So we're a very big actor in DeFi, and I'm a huge DeFi bull. Okay, like I think DeFi, it's not only cool, it's not only valuable. I think it's important. I think it was in Pantera Summit of 2019. They had the head of the CFTC back in the day. I don't remember. I'm blanking on his name. And he told an amazing story, or a very insightful story, how during the 2008 crisis, he was at the White House. And when I think it was Lehman Brothers was coming down. Okay, so it came crashing, and the government kind of had to decide. I'm not sure which agency. I'm not I've been living in the US for 9 years. That does not mean I know which committee is responsible for anything.
Right.
Like he was at the decision, with Obama at the White House, like needing to make a decision. And they were kind of like looking at the numbers and say, we have enough money to prevent Lehman Brothers from fading. We can save it. But if there are 20 such banks out there, we can't save. We don't have the funds to save them all. So the question was, do we save it or do we let it crash? And the problem with the banking system is that each bank was kind of like holding different funds and all sorts of like financial instruments of other banks. So each one was holding others at all sorts of prices and weird setups. And it wasn't clear which banks are good and which are about to come crashing. So they had to make a decision without knowing what's good, like what's the actual status of the financial infrastructure in the United States, the largest economy in the world. And they made the decision to let Lehman Brothers crash. And 5 years later, which is how long it took everybody to figure out who was holding which bank at what and what, the holding patterns and the financial instruments. 5 years later, they're kind of like, well, you know what? There were 3 such banks. And they could have saved it. They could have prevented the entire 2008 crisis. They had the funds to do it, but they didn't because they didn't know what's happening. And one of the things that DeFi brings, and it's critical and important, is transparency. You can just go and see immediately which protocol hold what assets of which other protocols. You have complete transparency to who holds what, at what valuation and what value, and everything around that. And that, I think, even before, forget, not even talking about self-custody, not talking about like leveling the playing field so I get the same interest as the son of, like JP Morgan's CEO's son or something like that. Just the fact that you have transparency is critical. So I am super bullish on DeFi. I think that building a single, global, always on, transparent, permissionless and open in the sense that, the internet is open. Anybody can open a store. Anybody could go to any website. So DeFi is open in that sense. Anybody could participate. Anybody could start new things. I think that is fantastic, remarkable, and important to the world. So that's the thing that gets me excited. The downside of it, though, is that I don't think DeFi is good enough. Okay, when I look at what we're doing right now, and that insight became very strong for me after FTX imploded, I realized that DeFi is just not providing a good enough alternative. FTX imploded, taking Celsius and Voyager and blanking on the name of the other big one, and quite a few other centralized mechanisms with it. And everybody kept saying, well, that's okay. DeFi actually didn't fail. DeFi operated as intended. But my argument is that DeFi did fail to provide an alternative. Okay, people went to FTX and continued using centralized exchanges despite knowing the risks. Okay, we know centralized exchanges tend to blow up. This is not the first, nor the third, nor the 10th. Okay, you can go all the way back to Mt. Gox and anywhere in between to see all the centralized exchanges that blew up. People used it because DeFi wasn't convenient enough and it wasn't easy enough. It wasn't good enough. And so when I look at what we should be building, what am I excited about? I'm excited about DeFi, but I'm excited about making DeFi not just, this cartwheel running behind centralized exchanges. CeFi is the real thing, and DeFi kind of like runs behind it, getting arbitrage, but not very useful. I want DeFi to compete with CeFi. I want DeFi to be the place where everything happens. I want DeFi to move in real time. So price discovery actually happens on DeFi, not just, Uniswap LPs getting arbs because the price on Coinbase and Binance. So that's the thing I would say, most excited about. What am I working for? I'm working on making DeFi competing with CeFi. That's the thing that gets me up in the morning every day. And you can probably hear it right now. This is like the 100th time I'm talking about it. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the passion is actually very obvious. So fascinating answer. I think I want to turn with the time we have left. I'd love to talk a little bit more as a continuation of some of what you were talking about, kind of about the space writ large, where if I could ask you maybe to put on your, elder statesman hat, maybe temporarily, since you've been in the space quite a while. I'm curious, what do you think crypto in 2023 is getting right? And what do you think it could be doing better? Whether you want to focus on DeFi or not, since you've already kind of commented some on this and DeFi.
A short comment on DeFi, just because I already spent time on that. DeFi should stop thinking how to compete with other DeFi protocols and remember that DeFi's goal is to compete with CeFi. So we need real-time DeFi for price discovery where people, arbitragers should constantly correct the price. So when you go and buy on Uniswap, you will get the same price as you would go and buy it on Coinbase, not the price that it was 12 seconds ago or worse. So DeFi, there's definitely the thing that excites me and the thing that we should be doing right. And some things are going in that direction. I have my issues with Friends Tech, but it's because I think they're not. They're doing it in, it starts as semi-scammy and Ponzi, but it's kind of okay, that's a good way to bootstrap a system. And the question is, do we make it better? Do we make it worse? And then I got really angry with them because they tweet, I gave it permission to tweet on Twitter, and they actually did it. Oh, buy my keys or something like that. So yes, shame on me for not revoking that permission immediately after signing up, but also shame on them for this. No, this is potentially exciting. Do you really want to play these stupid games? And so I think potentially more consumer-facing applications on the social side are one interesting thing that I'm seeing. The thing that I would argue, and it's kind of still related to DeFi, I think the thing that we're doing wrong right now is very much in the context of MEV. I think there's this, for people who aren't super familiar with it, MEV is basically the idea that, you make a transaction, and if there's a value to be extracted from it, it would be extracted. So if you look at the price of ETH right now, and it's $2,000, and you try to buy it at $2,000, if the price would go up, your transaction would fail. So you would usually don't put $2,000. You say, I'm willing to pay up to $2,010 or something like that. And at that point, you basically sign up. You will get $2,010, even if price goes in the different direction. Somebody will take your transaction, front run it, back run it, sandwich it, etc. And it's an issue in DeFi, an issue needs solving. But I think just giving up and saying, that's okay, all transactions will be front run and will be back run and will be sandwiched, etc., is a short-sighted perspective, because you don't realize that if this happens, it makes DeFi less useful. If DeFi is less useful, it will have less traction and less liquidity. people would go to CeFi, right? If I have $1,000 and I want to buy ETH, where do I go and buy it? On Coinbase or on Uniswap? And if I buy it on Uniswap, I'll get sandwich. And if I buy it in Coinbase, I will get the current correct price, which is what I want, right? I'm not trying to beat Jump or Wintermute at getting the picosecond, bottom or something. I just want to get the current correct price. I don't want to have like 5 screens and compare the prices on different venues. Just give me whatever is the current correct price. And so the thing that I think we should be focusing on there is not necessarily accepting the current MEV perspective or direction.
Fascinating. So maybe a couple last questions for you here, Yuri, before we wrap up. One question would be kind of another recurring one here on this podcast, where just kind of blue sky question. If I were to put to you or ask you, the future of crypto is blank, as you kind of look into your crystal ball, how would you fill in the blank?
I would say the future of crypto is filled with up and downs and cycles, and definitely going up to getting more traction and more success. So I see value in crypto. And again, I'm a giant DeFi bull. So in DeFi more than anything else, I see other things as well. But in DeFi in particular, I see a lot of value, and this would happen over time. It just takes time. I remember speaking with people at 2017, like, yes, Ethereum is this great thing, and it would change everything that we do, and it changes the way we think and the way we talk. And I was like, dude, I'm not sure what you're talking about at this point. But there's like this, it's not the bull notion of kind of like, oh, this is like, the breakthrough of the millennia and everything changes right now. No, this is the thing that now change and continue changing and getting more and more traction. We're seeing it. So I think the future of crypto is successful and specifically or important and getting more and more traction, but with victories and losses. Like not everything's going to go the way we want it. We're going to have setbacks, and anybody who expects it to be anything different is not realistic.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay. Yuri, last question here. What is your team working on right now, and what's the best way for people to follow along on the journey?
So we have a few main focuses right now. As I said, we're a major actor in the MEV landscape. I have this under the hood project which I'm trying to do to make DeFi compete with CeFi instead of just the regular MEV setup right now. So that's like one, I call it IIETH, Instant Inclusion ETH, basically trying to take DeFi and move it to become real time. And I argue that it's a win-win-win for everybody. So that's like one thing. The second thing is that we're working both on Ethereum and BSC and Polygon and Solana on building the best tooling for DeFi traders. So nobody like high frequency traders because they capture arbitrage and they have like this really bad reputation. But I think people are getting it a bit wrong. What you really don't like, or the reason you don't like high frequency traders, is because they front run you and they sandwich you in centralized and traditional finance. The fact that arbitrageurs exist is actually fantastic. Okay, you want arbitrageurs to constantly correct the price. So when regular users try to buy something, they'll get the current correct price. And so we're building the tools and the utilities for large actors to participate in DeFi, specifically so we make these markets actually more valuable for people to participate. So that's a second thing that we're building. I think these are the two important pieces that I see kind of like that we're focusing on right now, providing the DeFi tools for people to participate and for institutionals to participate. So DeFi isn't this niche thing that just get arbitrage. It's to make it equal to CeFi and compete with CeFi and valuable and useful for users and large actors and everybody.
Perfect. Yuri, thank you so much for coming on the show. Fascinating looking at all the cool work you guys are doing and really appreciate your time. So have a great rest of your
week. Thanks, Sandra. This was a blast. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Take care.